So committee, thank you for wrapping up this morning in good fashion. Keep your thoughts about that ready to go at the end of the afternoon. We'll have a couple of directives based on that. This afternoon, landowner habitat is another one of the major pieces of mostly educational experience today. Jim Magagna is here, our Executive Vice President of the Stock Growers. And then, of course, Director Bruce. Please come forward, you guys. We look forward to your comments and thoughts regarding landowner habitat. And
Mr. Chairman, my apologies for interrupting.
You bet.
Just before we jump in, just wanted to point out, Ms. Miles prepared a fact sheet as well, and we're fine jumping right in, but I just wanted to alert the committee that that is available in your materials. It's just a fact sheet that describes what other states do for compensation programs. So that is available in your materials, Mr. Chairman.
So thank you so much for that, Brian. My apologies. I'm glad that I was reminded. If you guys don't mind just taking a moment, let's do a 30,000 foot view real quickly through that. If you don't mind, Ms. Miles, is that okay? I want to make sure that everybody knows the content therein. Do you have that handy? If not, we can come back to it.
Mr. Chairman, I am pulling it up, but it is a non-comprehensive brief overview of the general habitat programs in each state, most of which touch on conservation easements, depredation issues, as well as, and I'm forgetting one.
We're probably okay then. Let's let that rest.
Okay.
Be ready for any questions that we have on that. But committee, I would commend that to you. Thank you for the reminder, Brian. That is a good foundation for conversations upcoming. So there's more than just you two here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So welcome this afternoon, all three of you guys. Appreciate it. Take it away. Whoever wants to start.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know my name is first on the agenda, but I'm going to defer to our distinguished Director of the Game and Fish to kind of set the stage for where we've come in our discussions with this, and then I'll proceed from that point.
Okay, Director, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to be at the table with stock growers, Jim Magagna, and National Wildlife Federation, David Wilms today. You know, thinking about, and you have a handout in front of you, you can refer to it or you can just set it aside. We'll talk you through it. But when it comes to this conversation about really keeping working lands working and working for wildlife, I think back to when I grew up, and I grew up on a farm, very familiar with working private lands. Everyone in my life was a farmer. My cousins, my uncles, I didn't really know anything different. But what it taught me is the value of those who work the land. And I think those values are here in Wyoming as well. So really this conversation, I really much enjoy because it combines my two loves, my love for landowners and my love for wildlife. And what else is really important in this conversation is how we work together. I think you guys have noticed that there is a wedge being driven in between landowners and sports people in this state over the last several years. And we would like to work on that and try to improve that and bridge that gap. When I attend annual conferences across the state with my counterparts, I always get asked, how do you get so much work done in your state? How come you're continuously leaders? How come you do things differently? And for the first year or so, I sort of blew it off. Like, it wasn't my doing, it was the people before me. But then I figured it out. It's because of how we work in the state. Part of it's because we have less people, so we do work with each other a lot. But we create relationships that we use over and over and over again. My first introduction to Mr. Magagna was on a controversial bill that I think that senator who just walked out of the room was proposing. And even though we are on different sides of the issue, we decided to sit next to each other in testimony and in the room and try to find a way. And that is really what this is about, taking these opposing issues, taking this conflict between landowners and wanting them to be recognized for the wildlife habitat that they provide in the state, wanting them to continue working on the landscape, which I think is a shared vision that we all have. And then our sports people and understanding that they want healthy wildlife populations, but they also want access to them. In our strategic plan, when we do a very thorough job of trying to understand what our public in the state wants, every time one of the top issues is access. So how do we look at this, and how do we look at this differently? And that's what we're here to propose today. We don't have an answer for you. I'm going to be clear up front. What we want to propose is a process to help us lead to a possible answer. So we want to convey a process, convey a group of individuals from both sides of the community, both landowners and sports people, to tackle this issue. So we're asking for you guys to give us a little time. We're asking you to let us institute this idea and come back to the table in September with recommendations or results of that process. Really, the Wyoming way, get us around a table, get people thinking, look at other models from other states like LSO just went over, but then also think creatively about what the Wyoming way would be and what that looks like. So that's our proposal here today. It's spelled out in the document I handed to you at the bottom. But with that, I want both Jim and David to talk a little bit about their perspective on the issue, and then we'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim McGagnon with the Wyoming Stockgrowers Association. Thank the director for her comments. The only qualification I may have to sit here more than my colleagues is that I've been facing this issue in one way or another for about the past 50 years. But I think that the thing I've learned from that and come to understand more recently is that what was the right answer to these relationships? First of all, the relationships were different 50 years ago or 40 years ago or even 20 than they are today. And the right answer to maintaining them, recognizing the value that our landowners provide, recognizing the importance of the sports person community in the state have changed. And certainly, if you look at the array of landowners in the state today, it's not to the same degree the typical multi-generational ranching family or farming family that we all knew years ago. It's evolved over time. If you look at the hunting community in the state, it's far more diverse in many ways than the community that we knew 30, 40, 50 years ago. So I think the timing is ripe, if not even overdue, that we need to look at this issue not by beginning with the answer and fighting over that answer, but looking at what the objectives are and recognizing that those are common objectives for the most part. And within them, there are going to be areas of conflict. But how can we move forward with something that recognizes the key role that landowners play in providing the habitat for our valued wildlife in the state, and the key role that our sports person community plays in managing that habitat? So that's where we see the opportunity, and that's why we brought this issue forward. We've reached out to other groups within the ag community to seek their support for saying, let's sit down, and none of us sit down and say, I've got the answer, but let's sit down, define a mutual understanding of the problem, the challenges that we face with it, and then begin to evolve forward with an answers. And I fully suspect that what I'm hopeful we can come up with, it isn't going to be you do one little thing and that solves it. That takes care of everybody. It's going to be a combination of things put together that can work. I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm willing to take landowner transferable licenses off the table, but neither am I willing to say that that's the answer to the problem. That's a part of the discussion that needs to take place with people who are open to looking at all the options out there. What are the ones that to the greatest extent can meet the needs of the landowner community, recognize the critical role that we play in providing not only providing wildlife habitat, but we're also critical to providing the hunting community with access to that wildlife, and that needs to be a part of the discussion as well. You can't separate landowner understanding and compensation for providing habitat without understanding and encouraging landowners to provide habitat to provide opportunity for people to utilize their land done in the appropriate manner in order to manage and harvest this wildlife. And it's no different than those of us who are in the livestock business. We grow a crop, and we have to harvest that crop every year. And with our wildlife in Wyoming, we want to successfully grow the greatest crop possible, but we also want to have the right tools in place using the people in Wyoming and those who come to Wyoming to harvest that population every year so that we maintain stable populations of wildlife that are not overly burdensome on landowners, but provide full opportunity for people who want to go out and take advantage of hunting opportunities. So we're excited about the potential to do this. And we think that starting an initiative like this in the private sector with the affected interests as diverse as they may be, that hopefully we can come forward with something that then we can put in your hands that the legislature can consider, and if you agree with, move that forward more easily than if we start with legislation and then we're each in there to defend what we want or don't want in that piece of legislation. So that's, as the director pointed out, why we're asking for a little patience on your part, realizing that you have a limited time to do things, and if legislation is going to come forward in the 2027 session, it needs to be developed before December, but we would ask for that opportunity. Appreciated the handout that was provided by LSO, and by coincidence, actually last spring, I had a young law student at the University of Wyoming who was doing an externship with me, do an analysis of Wyoming's program and analysis of the programs in 5 or 6 of our neighboring states. She provided me with an outstanding document that really, from a little more of a legal perspective and how the legislation reads, but spells out each of those alternatives. I thought it was premature maybe to share that at this point, but I will certainly share it with the group if assuming you approve that we put together to work on this issue, because I think it provides a good starting point for our discussions. There are things in several of our neighboring states that look like they could be a good fit in Wyoming, particularly some things in Utah and in Colorado. And then there are things in those states that, given our wildlife situation, given who we are as people, that I think probably just don't work in our state, and we need to be open to all of those considerations. With that, Mr. Chairman, happy to take any questions after you've heard these presentations, and hope that we can move forward in a meaningful way.
By the way, I agree with you. You guys starting this conversation is better than us. You don't want to let legislators get something started. That's not going to work.
But we can depend on you to conclude what we start.
Yeah, there you go. We do appreciate you being here, Jim. Thank you. Part of the impetus of trying to put this all together by us chairmen was the fact that we had 2 or 3 committees doing 2 or 3 different things last year, and that didn't make any sense to us. And I just thought, let's put a tent over this whole thing and let's go to work on it, and really appreciate your thoughts so far, and I'm intrigued. So David, you're next. Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Magagna before let's go to David. Good afternoon. Welcome.
Thank you,
Appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I've spent more than 20 years of my career trying to avoid being in this seat, and I have mostly succeeded. But when I got a call from Director Bruce and from Mr. Magagna about this idea, I couldn't help but come here today. So the one thing I'm a little different with is I don't have the seasoned experience as the other two, so I have some notes, so bear with me. But I wanted to, first of all, thank you for this opportunity to be here. Lifelong Wyoming resident, I'm a passionate hunter, and I've spent more than 20 years navigating the complex intersections of wildlife law and natural resource policy. And over the course of my career, I've had the privilege of working across the spectrum. I've worked for in state government, I worked in the private sector, and I've advocated within the nonprofit community. And in all those roles, I've represented the interests of landowners, I've represented the interests of states, and I've worked extensively on behalf of hunters and anglers. And because of that, I feel like I've seen a lot. I've also seen a lot change in a relatively short, I like to think a 20-year career is pretty short still. I've seen a lot change in that career, right? There's been growing tension, as been mentioned in the past several years, that I don't think we saw before between the hunting community and the landowner community. And it's concerning, but somebody that's studied the history of wildlife management in Wyoming, for example, it doesn't have to be that way. And it hasn't historically been that way. Wyoming's always been a leader, an innovator in areas of wildlife management, conflict resolution. You know, the landowner community and the sportsman's community has been locked at the arms on some of the most impactful conservation, wildlife management, conflict resolution programs we've seen in this country. A lot of them start here. Some of our, the hunting community stood decades ago before any of us were born. Maybe not Mr. McGagna. But before most of us were born, the hunting community supported our license fee dollars going to support landowners that suffered losses or damage from wildlife. Because we recognized the fact that landowners are the ones providing habitat, that in the winter months, some of our most iconic species are spending their time on low elevation irrigated fields. And that we have a responsibility, if wildlife is the property of the state and is managed on behalf of all citizens of the state, that we have an ethical obligation, a moral obligation to help, as hunters, to help shoulder some of the burden of managing that. And that comes in the form of making sure landowners are compensated for being stewards of that land. So we've done a lot of that over the years. That's one example. The Wildlife and Natural Resource Trust account, that's another example. The work that we've done on brucellosis, where we have effective citizen scientists from the hunting community out there collecting samples so we can track, and help maintain a brucellosis-free status for our ag community in Wyoming. These partnerships are all over the place, and they're done outside of this room, and they come into this room, and then you all make these impactful, lasting decisions through policy that are modeled by other states. The Wildlife and Natural Resource Trust is a perfect example that has been adopted by other states. I think we have the opportunity to do that again. This is some of these tension points that we're dealing with right now are not unique to Wyoming. And I think Mr. McGagna mentioned it. You told me to call you Jim. I'm sorry. I'm not going to do that. They're not unique to Wyoming in that other states are dealing with this, but we have an opportunity. What we have the opportunity to do is to create a solution that is unique to Wyoming, but that does take a little bit of time. I'm really excited about the prospect of continuing to work with these two on identifying what some of those solutions might be, what some of those opportunities might be, so that we can again be at the forefront and leading on some of these challenges that we've always led on. So I really appreciate having the opportunity to be here today. And I'd close with the last thing. Hunters and anglers and the landowner community are natural allies and have been for years. And if we don't resolve this tension in a productive way, we all lose, because there are so many interests out there that want to see agriculture fail, and there's so many interests out there that want to see hunters and anglers fail. And if you can drive a wedge there, then they've won. And so this is an opportunity in my mind to have that partnership that we've always had, and to ensure that our children can continue to grow up in the same Wyoming that we've all grown up in, with abundant wildlife and opportunities, and from my standpoint, opportunities to hunt that wildlife. So thank you. I'll turn it back to to Director Bruce or stand for questions.
And
Very-
Mr. Chairman, my apologies.
Yes,
If we
Brian.
could just have Mr. Wilms introduce himself and his affiliation for the record, that'd be great. Thank you.
I will refuse to
Oh,
do that.
me.
No,
My fault.
David Wilms, Associate Vice President at the National Wildlife Federation, based here in Wyoming.
Welcome, David. Appreciate it. And very well stated. Even though you don't have quite as many years as Jim, but appreciate all three of you being here on this topic. I think this is a really big one, committee, and it really fits into what we've talked about the entire morning. And it's intriguing to me. I'll be anxious to see what we can come back with, because I think it can be folded under some of the things that we've got in mind that we've talked about here. It struck me during the session, as we looked at some bills that came from other committees. We've got an opportunity to try to figure this thing out, and this habitat piece is everything, really. It's critical. And Jim, you're exactly right that things have changed pretty dramatically in our state. When you think about when guys like you and me grew up, my dad, by the way, proudly, was a 41-year veteran of the Wyoming Game and Fish Department. And over in Daniel, he knew every one of our landowners, and he made sure that he stopped in with a red shirt on to make sure those landowners knew who he was. And when they branded, I branded, we moved cattle. The game and fish guys were very much a part of everything. So that was a good thing, and that laid the groundwork for what's continued all the way to today. But the changes have kind of come in those legacy ranches a little bit, as you pointed out, Jim. And we've got a lot of outside interests now that have come in and taken over some of our ranches and don't have that background that we've got. So, committee, questions of these three? Representative Thayer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is fabulous. Excited to see this. Couple things, just thoughts is, as I'm reading on the next steps, I lay in a unique setting on that landowners, just to take into account the checkerboard. I think sometimes when we think about things that, it's a little different for the northern ranches versus the southern part of the state is the checkerboard. And again, as Mr. Wilms suggested, this unique solution, without natural resources this year, and wells and landowners and wildlife, everybody's going to definitely have to work together and collaborate. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Representative. Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is probably a little early for the question, because perhaps that's what we're going to talk through the rest of the afternoon, is just logistically what this looks like. Who decides who's on the committee, who is going to be involved, what is the scope of work? I mean, if we're talking, landowners, are we covering everything from landowner tags to transferable to access to damages to, what is the scope, I guess, of work, given that you have two months, 3 months? Yeah, logistically, kind of what does that look like?
Director.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
Representative, thanks for that question. It's going to happen fast, right? Because it needs to. We've been talking about that a lot. And first of all, the makeup of the group. We talked about Jim being able to pick 3 people to join him in the conversation, and David as well. And the department would be present and provide support. However, we were looking at a neutral facilitator to help with the conversation. Again, setting the goal and the scope, we've got some of that identified on the handout. It's pretty broad, but really letting the group help define that further. The first meeting, that would be essential. Things on the table, I think, is your final question. There's many things that have been floating around in this conversation. Exactly what Mr. Magagna said is, we all know transferable license has been the conversation, but it's not the only thing. From a department standpoint, I would have my goals, which are access, habitat, public benefit. Can we open that door on damage claims? All these different components that all can play together in a solution. So outlining what those are and seeing if a solution can be based on addressing those issues. So still a work in progress. Yeah, we're well of the time frame. It's going to be a little bit of a struggle. But we feel that we owe that to you guys if you give us this opportunity to do everything we can to bring something back by September.
Well, many of this group will be a little busy over this next 2 months. Everybody's pretty much aware of that. A lot of signs to be put up and things like that. So we appreciate you guys. Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, and just thoughts, I mean, myself and Representative Campbell served on that wildlife task force, and there was a subcommittee that worked on, all these issues that we're talking about. And I know the department has records of those. It would be worth going and looking. I mean, the bill that we sponsored last year was that came out of that the department, the commission looked at and said it's going to require legislation. It's really a segue into trying to tackle this bigger issue, but that would be a good starting point for everybody to take a look at as some of their recommendations. And the public comment that came back, there was some potential areas of agreement with some transferables when it comes to like cow-calf, doe fawn licenses. So maybe that's a bridge to start building places. And just one other comment, Mr. Chairman. I remember coming up here, and it's been a number of years ago, to a big wildlife symposium. Been a number of previous directors. Terry Cleveland was the director at that time. We all remember Terry. But he said something I thought was pretty profound at that. And there was a question as to what can we do about wildlife in Wyoming? And I'll share you the abbreviated version is we can't control the federal government. 48% of what happens in Wyoming is a decision that's going to be made by the federal government. And we can maybe have some influence, but if they're going to do an oil and gas lease or whatever that is, a strip mine, they're going to move forward to that. And other than provide input, we really can't control the outcome. But he said what we can do is work with the other 52% of the people that own Wyoming. And that's the sweet spot, because we can work with those people. And so I think this is kind of a reoccurring philosophy that, this has been 15, 20 years ago that we've seen that the department has recognized, the benefit to private lands and the opportunities. And those opportunities are tremendous if we can come to some level of agreement, because that's where the real opportunity lies, is the private lands, particularly eastern Wyoming on a lot of this stuff. But just thought I'd share that with the insights from one of our previous directors.
No, I think the director would join me in knowing who Terry Cleveland is, and he's a great friend, and he's a Casper guy. I just wanted you to know.
Don't hold it against him.
Committee, further comments or questions regarding this whole area of habitat? Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This will be kind of a silly question, but I see that you're going to have, with this small work group, going to be facilitated by a neutral third party. Do you think you can find somebody in Wyoming that would be neutral? Just a question.
Yeah. What do you think, Director? Is there any?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, we spent quite a bit of time just on that question. I think Jim bought us lunch to try and sway that a little bit, but we talked it through. We were we haven't landed exactly where, but some of the considerations that we've been talking about are Hobbs School, some facilitation within the Hobbs School. We also have talked about Department of Ag, which I get that's a little one-sided, but if anybody's worked with Lucy Polly in the past, she's a very neutral facilitator that I've had her help me on wildlife issues before. So yeah, we're tossing that around to find really that neutral party is going to be important. So yeah.
One more, Senator Hicks.
Do you need a third-party facilitator?
What do you think?
Any
Mr.
member here?
Magagna, what do you think?
We felt that we would benefit from having that, just so that there's someone that keeps the momentum going, that you don't sit there and, well, gee, we disagree on something, so we spend the next 4 hours without making any progress. And I think that it's neutral is a good term. Is anyone neutral, as Senator Schuler has pointed out? But a person who has a professional training in facilitating and running these meetings, just to keep the meeting moving along, we believe there's value in that.
Yeah, I would double down on that and just to say we're talking about a really tight time frame here. And if we were talking about a year or two, we could probably do it without a facilitator. But when we're talking a matter of months, having somebody with that professional experience and that ability to keep us on task and moving in the right direction, I think is really important.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you, David. That's very well stated. And we know this is a narrow time frame, but we've got a kind of a unique circumstance here. I keep talking about a committee that we're lucky enough to chair, but honestly, we've got a great panel here that is ready, willing, and able to lift this up. If you can bring us something that you think will work, we've got the man and woman power here, I think, to make it, to stand it up. So that's what kind of excites me, but we do have to get after it and work it in a hurry. There were some things that came up this morning too, Director, that I think we can have, 2 suites going on here. This one, we can tweak some things that we talked about this morning that might be helpful to the department and to just management in general. But then we've got this other piece that is even, to me, more exciting, which includes the piece that we're talking about this afternoon. We pulled the habitat piece into this legacy effort that we're kind of flirting with, and I get excited about what that might be able to do for those who provide the habitat to us. That might take away some of the tension that we've got with landowner permits, because they become less of a concern if we're able to take better care of those landowners. So anyway, I hope that all makes sense. I'll try not to go on and on about that, but I think that's really the goal that I think at least some of our committee is on board with. So committee, other things, Representative Storer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I really appreciate you all working on this. It comes in some of the history. I'm old enough with Mr. Magagna to remember a lot of issues that we tackled, some open space issues going back a few decades, state land issues. And Mr. Williams, as I recall, I first met you a couple decades ago, and I think I was trying to convince you to be in this seat over here, as I recall, even way back then. And I just wanted you to know there's still some opportunity before Friday at 5:00 even. I think there's an open seat in the Senate in your district. So anyway, just something to think about as well, perhaps down the road. Thank you.
Well, I love the way the representative thinks, don't you, David? Yeah. Let's figure out how to get to yes, you know what I mean? Yeah.
And Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
we will be happy to support that filing before 5 p.m. on Friday.
Yeah, there you go, Mr. Magagna. That's good stuff. So, well, don't be afraid to dig down. If we're good to go, committee, we will keep moving on here and get to the directives of the day. Trying to think if,
Senator, if I could just follow up on one item.
yeah, go ahead, Director.
We will notify you of the public meetings in order to attend and engage yourself, but we'll make you aware of our timeline and all those touch points as we go along.
Director, if you're able, it would be terrific if you would be willing to Zoom those. If there's capability to do that, it would really help everyone, I think. I would suspect you'd have quite a few people listening in so that they're ready to respond at the appropriate time and whatever. If there's anything that you need out of the chairman or me or the committee, please let us know on this front. But if that's it, committee, I'll let Mr. McGagna, David, sit back and we do need to visit a little bit more, Director, because there were some things that came up this morning. We want to make sure that that we encourage that be brought back as well. So thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, if you were moving on to the next topic, I just wanted to remind you about public comment on the landowner issue.
Thank you. We better do public comment, Director. Thank you. Appreciate it. Is there anyone online this afternoon? Anybody want to come forward, public comment on, we were talking about landowner habitat this afternoon. Thank you for that reminder, Samantha. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Karen Clark. I'm with the Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation, and we very much appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation and thank Mr. McGagna for the opportunity to join with him on the conversation as we brought it forward to an interim topic. Thank you to the committee for taking this important topic up. Thank you to Director Bruce and David Wilms as well for their work. And so we appreciate the opportunity. This is the beauty of Wyoming, right? Is that exactly, is there anyone neutral? We all have so many connections, and when we just start talking to one another, there is something connecting us in Wyoming. And this conversation is so much about that. This is such an important topic to Wyoming and her citizens. And we thank you for making this an important topic for Wyoming. We support this process and we very much stand ready to be a participant and collaborate on this. As has been said before, so many different important points have been brought forth, but that wedge that's driven before us does nothing to benefit wildlife, and it does nothing to benefit our land here in Wyoming, and it does nothing to benefit our citizens of Wyoming. So this is that opportunity. I think, Mr. Chairman, you said it best before in the interim topics, is to do something epic. We really can do something epic here for the state of Wyoming, for wildlife, for landowners who provide that critical habitat for Wyoming's wildlife. And so we very much support this process, stand very ready to collaborate. Our members have had this conversation for a lot of years, decades and decades. I'm in the middle of, or a little bit past David there, 32 years with our organization, and our members have had this conversation and stand ready to talk about how we can move this issue forward rather than just to continue talking about it. What are those action steps? How do we make it better? So, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, we support this process. Thank you so much for the opportunity to visit with you, and again, stand ready for questions, and would definitely take any at this time if you have them.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. Really appreciate it. Questions for the Farm Bureau? Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Hello, Chairman, members of committee, Era Arano, representing Rocky Mountain Farmers Union. We too are delighted that this process is moving forward. We have a whole section in our member drive policy about the importance of keeping agricultural lands in production while providing open space, and the need to be compensated for some of what we provide, especially when it gets into our ever shrinking bottom lines. At the risk of not wanting to repeat everything, I just much appreciated. And I know our president, Chad Frankie over in Lander, would love to be part of discussions as they move forward. So thank you all for working on it, and we'll see you again in September.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate it. Any questions, committee? Okay, appreciate you both. Thanks. Further testimony. We're talking about landowner and habitat in general. Any further testimony? Okay, we're going to close public testimony. And now, Director, we can just have a visit about where we go from here. In my mind, is the desire to make sure that our second meeting is productive. I know that it will be on the habitat front. I look forward to whatever you can bring to us in that respect, Director. But we had committee members, we had several things that came up this morning. I wanted to make sure to capture them so that, and some I thought maybe even rose to the level of a bill draft. I did not write those down, but wanted to come back to you, Director, with, you may have a thought or two of something that we would want to consider a bill draft, and we would vote whether or not we want to chase a bill draft on something, but what are your thoughts about the conversation this morning?
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman, one of the things that I wrote down is for us to first investigate what Representative Harshman talked about with the constitutional trust that had been set up and the ability to use that in any way, shape, or form. So that's definitely on the department to go back and research and bring that back to you for further conversation and see if that's an option.
So it was brought up this morning, committee, that we may want to consider what powers we give to the commission, whether or not we want to at least look at a bill draft that would allow for them a certain latitude to increase the cost of a fishing license, for example. I think it was Iowa that was referenced, that they put a 3% cap on that. So that was an issue as the director looks for others, but is there any interest in taking a look at a bill draft that would do that? Okay, let's move on to other issues. Is there any other issues that came up this morning that you would like to see tackled in the second meeting committee?
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hicks.
Discussion we had with Meredith about the complication with all the different buckets and everything. And Phil, I want to recall the committee's memory here. For the last couple of years, your Capital Finance Committee worked with both the Cultural Resource Trust Fund and the Wyoming Wildlife Natural Resource Trust Fund to move those from what we would call an inviolate trust to a endowment model. And the reason to do that was to have significant higher rate of returns for both of those trust funds. It took us, 3 years of working on that. We got it done. It's now up and running and stuff. But when I run through and I look at the different accounts that the department has, from aquatic invasives to access, a couple of access funds and all that stuff, roughly there's somewhere between 90 and $100 million in all of these different accounts and stuff. And again, to broaden and give the commission and the department more authority on the discretionary ability to use those funds, my recommendation would be for the committee and the department to look at consolidating those into one account. The mission doesn't change. They're still going to do that. But we get rid of all these strings on these buckets and then put that in there and set up an endowment account model. And the reason that that's important is because we can do almost identical to what we've done with the trust fund and the Cultural Resource Trust Fund. You set up an income account, so they've got a percentage of that, but it's also set up for the purpose of inflation proofing that trust fund. Now, the reason that the endowment model is a little bit different is this: in a crisis situation, you can invade the corpus. Right. But it's rare or unlikely when we model that with both the Cultural Resource Trust Fund. But right now, we've got most of their monies in Pool A, or the agency pool. Those are the two lowest generating revenue funds that the state treasurer's office manages. And by moving to an endowment type model, what we did with both, particularly the trust fund, because the $200 million in there, not the cultural resource. The treasurer's office said that 25 is not sufficient, but it would put it into a PMPF, the Permanent Wyoming Mineral Trust Fund allocation. And that for the last decade has run about 6.5% versus the 3% off the agency pool. Now, we've had a home run the last couple of years, but it's a long-term strategy that accomplishes two things. We get rid of all these mandates of the department that you spend this $400,000 on invasive species, this 1.2 million on access, 85% goes this, 15% goes that. It says you still have the same mission and do that. We consolidate those one account. Brian did all of the drafting for both, I believe, the trust fund for wildlife and the cultural resource trust funds on those endowment models. Didn't you, Brian? You didn't do that? I thought maybe. Anyway, but we've got the model. And we worked 3 years on those other ones. And I think for simplifying the department's budget and giving them more flexibility, but also on the revenue side of the equation, we can probably double the interest income off those accounts that we're getting today by doing that. And so I would suggest that we have LSO kind of take those models that we worked on for 3 years and draft that up in that same type of model thing for something to look at for the next committee and then get input back from the department on that. But it just seems to me it's a direction that we ought to go. And it's
Senator,
consistent with what we've done with the law.
Before you make that a formal motion, let me just look to the director. Does that resonate at all? Because sometimes you never know with the senator whether it resonates.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for asking me. And yeah, that does resonate. And I do support where Senator Hicks is going with this conversation. Yep.
Okay. Would you like to make that a formal motion?
So moved.
Senator Hicks, do I have a seconded by Senator Schuler? Discussion on that. Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to be opposed to this. I played a pretty major role in helping establish the Wyoming Wildlife Natural Resource Trust, and we do not want to penetrate that. That was part of the agreement that allowed that to move forward and become what I believe is one of our crown jewels. And I think we're talking about breaking that crown apart. That was set up to be inviolate for a reason, and I think it's a mistake.
So, Representative, can you help remind me, which trust fund are you referencing?
Are you
the
referencing the
source-
Wyoming Wildlife Natural Resource Trust?
I don't believe that that's included in
Hey,
this
'cause
motion.
Mr.
That
Chairman,
one I know is inviolate.
actually, that's a statutory, if I may, to get to
Yeah,
Representative.
go ahead, Senator Hicks.
So it's a statutory trust, which is, they're never inviolate. We just say it is, but any legislature can go, every year you can
If
go.
you have to go get it, you can go get it.
Yeah, there's no guarantees because it's not a constitutional trust. But we got rid of that and moved away from that to an endowment model 2 years ago. And got away from that language specifically in there. And then the Cap Fin, again, worked on that for a number of years. I know Representative Storer was in those discussions and Representative Harshman. And then we set up an income account, so you still really don't invade that corpus. But the idea is it gives the treasurer's office the opportunity to pursue a longer range horizon for higher rate of returns. So that language no longer exists for the Wildlife Natural Resource Trust Fund as about being inviolate. And so initially it was in there, but it's a statutory trust.
I stand corrected, Representative. That does include the Natural Resource Trust. And what else? I'm looking real quickly here to go to the page, Director, that you provided to us.
So, Mr. Chairman, if you just go through that list that they provided, I mean, you look at those accounts, and so it's WS
I don't have it
21-3,
right.
it's G, E, F, H and I, and 31-231.
Are you in the packet that was provided to us,
Yeah,
Senator?
Chairman, it's in the appendix that LSO provided.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Senator Hicks, it's in Appendix A of the memo that I wrote on the statutes.
Thank you.
And we'll have to have staff look at these to make sure, and the department look at them and make sure that they're, I mean, just based on the notes here, it looks like those are potential funds that we would roll into the one large account for the endowment model. But it deals with the aquatic invasives, access, the conservation stamps, and then game and fish's big. And on that 23-1-501F, which is the 38 million, at least on the notes here, it says this is a statutory trust. So again, similar to wildlife cultural resource, it's just we can just change that and move it towards the endowment model there. Because that's really the big source of funding right there, the 38 million.
So technically, each of these would simply become a subhead underneath
Correct.
a trust. And so committee, did everyone find that list? Do we have that in front of us? We're talking about, we've got a motion on the floor. Is there further discussion? Any questions? Representative Harshman.
There it is. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And looking at that Appendix A, I think, as I understand the motion, I think it's more of a homework assignment for LSO to kind of see what the possibilities are to look at these. It does not include the Wildlife Natural Resources
Does not.
Trust, which is 220 million and rolling strong. That's been a 50-year undertaking. And so these funds in Appendix A. And I think the tricky part will be, some of these were set up with, the fee on boats. That sticker pays for, the invasive species. So, all these have little tiny revenue things. And I get where the senator's coming from. I think you just kind of combine all that into one thing. But I guess as much as anything, maybe the account is already there. And I think it's that number, it's in the 501F, which is count F08 on that appendix, that 38 million. That's just a standalone piece of money that appropriators have put in there over the years. And there is this little bit of money that's in this active emission account. And I think I don't know that is totally inviolate. I think the director's homework assignment on that, I'm not sure that it's inviolate. Okay, so I think all these things, I think we can learn and bring this homework back to us and see what can actually work. And we got a lot of the people at LSO have been working this for the last several years. We've been doing this. And then I'd just say, I think part of that homework assignment, I don't know if it's a friendly amendment, but kind of look what kind of funding stream could kind of start adding to this a little bit. I personally think with the budget reserve account going away, it's probably a severance tax. A little bit of severance tax, 10 million, 20 million, 30 million a year could go into this because it's all going to dump into the general fund right now. And so anyway, that's my thoughts on it, but I think it's worth exploring. And maybe LSO comes back and says, it gets too weird. Maybe we just take this 38 million and start building on it. And maybe that's the way and turn it into an endowment account. So thank you.
So Senator, a little less definitive might still get us there. We could always take that bill draft. We could request a bill draft, take it to the third meeting, still get it in under the wire, I would think.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, I'm not married on the bill draft as much as we have LSO staff. The other third party that's got to be critical to work with this is the treasurer's office. Because they're the ones that are going to say, look, at this threshold here, we're probably still going to do pool A. But the endowment model with the income account, we worked with them for 3 years on that. How do we maximize that rate of return on these funds and create these under the same type of thing that we've done with the wildlife and the cultural resource trust fund, and get some projections from them and is what they think. But again, so as far as the actual bill draft, if we want to go that way, or it's putting all the nuts and bolts together between the department, the LSO and the treasurer's office, and let's say this what makes sense of the bill draft, and we do that the next go around, I think that's fine. This is, at this point in time, these are the tidbits of information that have to be collected to put the bill together to get. But the other side of this is investment returns. The other part of the discussion was that we had is simplify the accounting and the expenditures of the monies for the department and trying to accrue these into account that can do all of it instead of having all these separate little accounting procedures.
So if we back off on the motion, is the second comfortable with, and committee, what we'll do then, this motion is to ask the director to work with our staff a little bit and do some homework about, are we able to do this thing? Can we pull all these funds together and make it work and it be of benefit to the department? Bring that back. I think, thank you, Representative Harshman. Good thoughts on that front. We get it all there and we can sort through it, and then we can request a bill draft for that third meeting. And I think that's a better way to go about it. All in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no? Okay, let's carry that forward then. And Director, thank you if you would work with our folks. Okay, we've had a few minutes to, Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, along your lines of what do we need to do? So I would put a request in for the department prior to the next meeting is, so when the director went through that list of things, oh gosh, I don't have it with me. It's in the presentation that you did. Here it is. If we go to page. So where I'm going with this, there was a series of kind of big headline type of topics that look at potential revenue.
I remember an insurance piece that,
Increased opportunity to additional seasons, preference point fee adjustments, aquatic invasives, decal adjustments, license insurance, is to take a look at those items and figure out whether the commission has the authority to do those, or they would require legislative authorization, giving the department rulemaking under those four broad headings would be able to come back. And if it requires legislation, then we can ask for a bill draft at our next meeting, if that's a direction the department wants to go. But right now, we're in an exploratory phase. What can the commission do? What's going to require legislative? So I would ask the director and her staff to go through that and see where they have the flexibility and what may require legislative. So the insurance issue.
Yep.
Is that something the commission can just wholly implement an insurance program, or does it require legislative authorization? So I think that will help at the next meeting, whether there's any other potential legislation to help the department move in that direction.
yeah, thank you, Senator. I think that's important. We had a hand raised down this way. Oh, Representative Harshman.
Mr. Chairman, thanks. And I think to add to that, you talked earlier about scaling up. There was conversation about the federal funds. There's ways we can do that and bring those ideas back, and the same thing, whether they can be done by the commission or if we need legislation which we probably do, to change some of that. So we can take full advantage, find out what state's doing it the best and if they can work here. Thank you.
Excuse me, I didn't have my mic on. Representative Storer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Slightly separate topic, but as a member of the Revenue Committee, I would enjoy engaging in the conversation to kind of take this list of ideas for revenues and see what they look like when we apply them to Wyoming. Obviously, there's a lot of different ideas we can look at from other states. Some of those might make sense for Wyoming, some of them might not, but at least we could take a look and say, well, what would that take? I know some other folks have done at least some of this, looking at what a half penny sales tax would generate, or I've actually got a few other ideas in some other arenas that I think also could produce revenues from less from a tax perspective, but perhaps from some other fees that people generate that folks that are benefit from the state of Wyoming's trust policies as an example. So I'd be willing to take that on with the chairs and just see if we could bring back at the next committee meeting, at least like, here's like the best ideas, and have anyone from the committee who really thinks there's a particular area we should be looking at. I think that's something we should do at least.
Okay, thanks, Representative. Committee, I think I've mentioned this before. I think this is a suite of considerations and potential bills that we can take up and have a good debate on. But then in a moment, we can get to a little bit bigger issue, which we've been kind of talking about all day as well. So let's finish up some thoughts about these bills, and then I want to get to the other suite. There's two different suites of bills that I want to talk about, and so Brian, are you picking up on what we can maybe do in terms of information to get back to the committee with? Did all of that make sense, or do we need to clarify?
So Mr. Chairman, we will look at the consolidation of accounts, particularly those in 23-1, 501. I don't think I have 23-1, 501. The consolidation of those accounts and the use of an endowment model similar to the Cultural Trust Fund. So that will be one piece that we'll look at. The other information that's been discussed is, and Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure if these are directed toward us as much as they were. I took these other requests to be more directed toward the department, but that would include their statutory authority for adjusting fees for certain decals, the ability to incorporate or create a license insurance program under their current authority and 23-1-302, I believe, which lists the powers and duties of the commission. And then also discussion, and Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure if there's any role for LSO to do with this, but additional ideas for revenue generating measures that would bring in funds for the Game and Fish Fund.
Yeah, so Director, does that make sense? Thank you, Brian. That's very helpful. Do all of those make sense? And hate to overload, but this is big enough stuff. We want to make sure to get some things in front of the committee where we might be able to help. So,
Mr. Chairman, it does. I will say that, taking other models and applying it to Wyoming can be helpful and a lot too, because there's almost a different model in every state. So if there's any direction on what models, or if you want to leave that up to us, to some of the ones that we think are a better fit. But I think what you're asking there is, so if you take a model such as the Missouri tax model or the Utah wind energy tax model, how much would that bring into Wyoming? What would that look like here? I think that's what you're asking, is take some of those and provide that feedback. But that part could be a little bit much in how to manage it, because we could do that for months, I think, because there's so many out there.
yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Committee that, Senator Bonner, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, along those lines, I don't think we necessarily have to look out of state to find good models for cooperation between our ag and the, sporting public here. We have the ADMB, for example. We have Access Yes, these existing programs within the state that ADMB may be unique to Wyoming as far as I know, where we already have our ag and our game and fish constituencies coming together and working together. And so I'd encourage the working group to look at those and maybe even give greater weight to those things that we know that work. And, I know that we talked about, we had an ag trust bill that was basically based off of ADMB. And so maybe that's a good starting point as well for talking about this intergenerational fund that would help support things that are mutually beneficial to both production agriculture and our hunting and fishing public. I mean, maybe there's even a bill that was already didn't quite make it across the finish line. That could be a good starting point there. So I just encourage. I think I get the impression we're kind of giving some general direction or thoughts, sharing some general thoughts to the working group. And that would be mine, is to, look at what we know works here, and because we do have a very good working relationship from these programs that have been around for a while, that got started before, I think, some of the consternation that we've been discussing here. So those are my 2 cents, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if the director has a response to that, but I think that, there's some existing models that would work even within Wyoming. I think it's a starting point for
Yeah,
something even better. So
I thought that was really well stated. And Senator Bonner, I thought we passed that bill in the Senate.
we did. Mr. Chairman, there's a few House members missing from the floor, and that died on a tie vote. So yeah.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was I had to say fluke, but it was kind of a fluke because I had the votes lined up, but people have to show up.
Well, if it was,
so,
if it's any consolation at all, you can't get any closer than that, Senator. I mean, a tie vote in the second house, that's pretty, that's
Mr.
pretty
Chairman,
darn
we're
good.
real close. A little bit more working. If we can add, something that's beneficial to our, hunters and anglers, I think that would help the concept to get across the finish line. So in all seriousness, I think it should be, it seems kind of right along the lines of what we may be talking about, and perhaps that's a useful construct, which we didn't invent. Like I said, is basically based off of AD&B, taking existing state entities and connect them directly with affected constituencies in the private sector.
Yeah, I think we could use any model that, I'm trying to think of the best way to go about. I'm not sure we're quite ready to ask Brian and Savannah to come up with bill drafts on this, but this bill draft that we've kind of flirted with all day, a legacy fund, it could be patterned after what Senator Bonner just pointed out. I mean, you could draft it underneath that. I like the idea of the constitutional trust that Representative Harshman has alerted us to. The whole idea that I had was to try to work a major bill like that, still taking care of that other fleet of bills we just talked about, potential bills. But this one is kind of the big lift that I'd love to see this committee try. And Senator Hicks, do you have an idea how we might stand this up for the second meeting?
No, but I've got some thoughts on it. Questions that we have to answer before we do that. And so there's really, and I think Representative Harshman alluded to this, is right now the only money out there that's discretionary is general fund money. Everything else is obligated. And so there's 2 issues. How are you going to seed it? And then are you going to continue to try to build it, which are 2 different things. A lot of the models that we've looked at, that LSO, it's at 1/8 of a sales tax or something like that. That's annual. But if you want to go in there and seed it, you have very limited options. And the discussion, I think, with Senator Bonner and I think with you, Mr. Chairman, a number of us had is really, if you're going to look at big money, so think last year we did the Energy Dominance Fund, which is what we call the OPSTA, the 1% severance tax. It's roughly $100 million. We diverted that one time last year. If you were going to go after a big chunk of money, that's really, to my knowledge, maybe, you previous appropriators have some, but that's the only thing out there. Now, keep in mind, currently, until we swept it this year for this one-time funding for energy dominance, 50% of that went to the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund corpus. 50% went to this Common School Permanent Land Fund, and I believe in 2028 it goes 1/3, 2/3. But that being said, Mr. Chairman, before we get too far into this, it's a great idea. Devil's in the details, and so where's the big money to seed it? Hopefully the other alternative is investment earnings, and because we don't profile those, would be early in the process is rather than go after the severance tax, is you go after investment earnings, and you say anything over a certain amount, it goes right in there. But those are the only 2 sources when you're talking $100 million plus money that's out there. And I would love to hear Representative Harshman opine on there, but I don't know of any other 2 And that's assuming that we have, like we did last year, 900 million investment earnings, those.
That's correct.
Because we don't profile those.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And Senator, you're right. That's why we keep calling it a big lift. This is not for the weak of heart, but it's worth doing. So Representative Harshman, what are your
He's
thoughts on it?
grinning.
Yeah, thank you. I think, the 1% severance, statutory 1%, does more good for the state when it goes in to the top of the savings and then it's saved. And then if we can take money on investment earnings on the backside, that is all gravy. But if you take out the feeder stock, I worry about that. And I've always kind of tried to oppose those, and we've done a pretty good job the last couple decades of only when we've been seriously broke, we dipped into that. So I think having a little tip after the tip is a beautiful thing. We've done a lot of good. And I also think over the cap severance, just over the cap severance that not talking about the 1%, but the part that's going to the general fund now that used to go to the budget reserve account. That's a nice way to have 10, 20 million a year just sweep right into this. After you take maybe 100 million, but keep in mind that after you take 100 million of investment, like July 1st, it's going to blow everybody's mind. I mean, you've been hearing about this. The investment income is higher than mineral income, first time in state's history. Well, July 1st, you're going to see it all. And it's going to go wham, and then it's going to fill the 5% spending policy. And then it's going to the reserve account, which is full pretty much, and then boom, to the corpus. Now, I don't like messing with any of that. It's all a beautiful thing. But if you're gonna look for a big chunk, I think after that investment thing is a place you could probably do that. And then you keep feeding the thing, I think is really good. And I don't want to geek out too much on this, but then again, think about the Wyoming, the Wildlife Natural Resource Trust Fund. That was a dream in the 70s. Jonah gas hit, we got rich, we put 100 million in, then we got poor and it sat for a while, and then we got some more money again, and we finally reached what was kind of the goal. So you're talking the horizon on this thing. It isn't going to happen in 6 months, but you got to kind of have a little plan. Maybe it's like when this happens, because it'll happen. We do this. That's the one guarantee of our revenue. It's very volatile. It's going to go up and down. And when we're at this point, and when many of us will be gone, it still happens. That's the beautiful thing you want to set up. And I think we can do that with over-the-top investment income initially, and then a little tiny sliver of severance just to keep on growing it. So that's my.
Mr. Chairman, could you ask him to repeat that in English?
Yeah.
Sound effects.
Yeah.
For the non-appropriators.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those MIPS and BIPs and, dumps and whatever, tough to follow. Representative Campbell,
Get the second tip to the dip.
sorry. Different topic than this one. To close out this conversation, go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I recommend probably not closing out with my comments, so please follow up. But my concern, Mr. Co-Chairman, right now is that we will not, and I appreciate the directives that have been given to the agency, but I really think we need to involve Brian and Savannah and LSO, because I'm concerned about our time from September to November. And I know we have a lot of time between now and our next meeting, but I just hope we can, in the next half hour or so, include them to a point where we can have some sort of framework bill draft that we may be able to plug some of the stuff into. I just am, that's a big lift to look at a bill draft in our November meeting with how important the subject is. So I just hope we can find a way with this cumulative joint committee to give a little bit more direction to LSO, so we have some tangible action items that we can then refine, tangible action items in September that we can refine in November. And I know that's a huge ask. I'm not coming with a solution. I'm just coming with a concern. but I've been thinking through it in the last hour and I just hope we can, as a committee, maybe give enough direction that we can have something to actually review in September that's pretty concrete.
Senator Hicks.
Inside, I agree with him. It's not a good idea to eat the seed corn with the obsta. But maybe we ought to have LSO draft up a bill that says the first $100 million of investment earnings, or if investment earnings hit 500,000, the next 100,000 trips automatically into this account. And then look at the X million over, and Steve can fill in the blank here, on the over the cap, on the, is it FMRs?
Severance.
Severance, yeah, the over
Be
the
better.
cap severance tax, the 10 million of that. I think we can get a bill draft conceptually that will do those two things. Don't you?
Yeah, I do too. Representative Harshman, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I think we can too. I think it's just whether, all these other little moving parts. But I'll just remind you, I mean, this beautiful building you're sitting in was the tranche method on excess investment revenue over what was profiled. And shazam, here we're sitting in a new building. And we didn't burn the seed corn, as the senator said, and the seed corn is still growing out there. And and I think some of us who have worked on CapFin would be happy to help and work on this on a little subcommittee and a little Zoom time and
If,
kinda.
Brian, I'd like to do that. I want to stand up something for consideration at a second meeting on a bill that's being talked about right here. So do you have the notes thus far that kind of get a feel for where we want to go with this?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if the request is, I guess I'll kind of outline what I have heard so far. And that would be a new, and I think at this point, what I'm hearing is a new statutory,
Trust.
not trust fund for Game and Fish that would initially be seeded from excess investment earnings. I think the amounts can be filled in, later. And then going into the over the cap severance tax revenues and taking, again, I think the number mentioned was 10 million.
Right.
That number could be whatever the committee decides. 10 million a year for however many years the committee decides that would go into that Game and Fish fund, which then I assume, there would want to be some sort of spending policy, with that account, similar to the other trust funds, that fund would be invested, I assume in equities, as is typical with other trust funds. And then, the income or the earnings of that account, depending on the spending policy amount, could then be expended for Game and Fish purposes.
We can work also, Brian, thank you. I think that's exactly right. And I think we can work on some verbiage that we will need for the bill to help folks understand what the intent is to the utilization of that dividends and interest off of that account. I want to be sure that it includes the opportunity to take care of habitat, for example, and we can work on that. So, committee, is that rounding into something you take a look at second meeting?
Yeah, Mr.
Senator
Chairman,
Hicks?
and I know Brian will do this, but we really need to engage budget and fiscal on this. Don Richards' shop, and I'm sure that's probably the first call Brian's going to make.
I think they're buddies. I think they'll get together. Yeah. Brian, yeah, thank you.
But again, I think, Mr. Chairman, I think we need to use the stuff that we've worked on for the last 3 years as far as both the corpus and the income account. Use the exact, almost identical, those were designed to spin off interest for funding, but also reinvest back into the corpus to inflation proof those accounts. And so, I mean, all that language is done for both the cultural and the Wyoming Natural Resource Trust Fund. This would look almost identical to that.
We can, Brian, at least take a look at the Boner bill from this last session. I don't recall the details, but we could potentially model some language out of that that would include our ag community. I just want to make sure that it's inclusive and understood that the game and fish can do what it needs to do with dividends and interest off of that. So, Senator Boner.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if as route we take, then the decision points for the committee is, who decides how we distribute those funds. And that bill also had sort of a laundry list of different areas that the money could be spent on. And so I think those are, some major policy considerations with that particular model. So it's just something to think about for the committee if that's something we want to kind of a structure we want to pursue.
Yeah. So Brian, we could just get on the phone one day soon and talk about this. And I would appreciate if Representative Harsman, if you'd be willing to sit in on a phone call real quick. Same way with Hicks and Boner. Anybody else who would be welcome? Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Mr. Co-Chairman, I was just thinking that, I think it would be appropriate to, I don't know if it's directive, but, just for the public to know and for those in this room that we do schedule probably a half day to a few hours at least to just make sure maybe after Ms. Collins and Mr. Fuller get this going, that we have kind of a follow-up to make sure we, massage it to where we can bring something to our Jackson meeting. And I would certainly be in favor of that, but procedurally, I'm unsure. I think just maybe with that comment, you can see that I'm in favor of that direction.
Okay, anything else, committee? Representative Harsman. And then we'll come back to Representative Campbell.
Why we're doing this, and these are all statutory trust funds, I think it'd be a nice little bill for this committee. Be a separate little bill, and it'd be a one pager that we really give the legislature and the people of Wyoming the opportunity to vote on. Should we make these constitutionally protected funds? Should the Natural Trust Fund, Wildlife Natural Resource Trust should the 988, should those be protected? And I think it'd be a little simple bill, but one pager. And maybe bring that for this committee, because I think it'd be great for this committee to kind of look at those things. I mean, we are the,
See any problem with that?
cultural.
Is that a motion?
That's a motion. Just another little bill for our consideration, because we're going to geek out on this. We're going down this road. It's on.
Boy, you notice how his eyes light up. So that is a motion. Do I have a second for discussion? Seconded by Representative Campbell, and now discussion. Senator Hicks.
Gives who the right to make a determination. So you're saying that we would have those, then they get a vote, but these are all constitutionally protected? And that if the vote passes 50 and plus one vote, if they are constitutional trust funds? Or do you then turn around and say, no, the legislature can decide with it? I don't think we can do that. Anyway, I'm just worried about the logistics of how you do that.
Okay, Representative Harsman.
Mr. Chairman, I think with a wide variety, different than like when the Hathaway was passed, where it was education related
carved
trust
out.
funds, like the Wyoming Tomorrow was constitutionally protected. I think this one, we'd have to spell them out. I mean, it might be 4 or 5.
So
But,
it would be similar to what we do, Mr. Chairman, for education. And so there's a constitutional provision that says the legislature from time to time in our constitution can designate educational trust funds, right? Wyoming's Tomorrow, Hathaway. Once we just designate that and it passed, it's a constitutionally protected trust fund. That's what you're talking about.
Representative Harsman.
Mr. Chairman, no, to be very clear, I think we would want to just spell out
Name it.
these specific ones and name them and put them out there. And I think it'd be good for us to have that discussion. And then as members go into what's it going to be, the 69th legislature? You'll have that background on some of that.
So Representative Harsman, this would include the Cultural Trust Fund. It would include 5 or 6 of these funds that would be included in this bill.
Mr. Chairman, that's my request, and I think LSO can look at those.
I think that's worth looking at. Committee? Yeah. Brian?
So, Mr. Chairman, I think it would be most helpful for the committee to decide which ones go in, and we can start with a bare bones bill, but ultimately, I think, the committee's going to have to give us direction on which accounts, the committee wants to be constitutionally protected.
So, Mr.
My
Chairman,
thought was to
we
let
only have two
Representative
right.
Parshman let us know which ones he's got in mind. I don't know off the top of my head all of what we'd be talking about here. We've got the Natural Resource Fund, we got the Cultural Trust Fund. What else, Representative Parshman?
I think the cultural, there's like four big ones, 3 or 4 big ones that are bigger than the rest, but Wildlife Natural Resources Trust. That's a big one, over 200 million. We have the Cultural Trust Fund now is 25, 30 million. There's an amendment on the House floor, we all remember. The 988 now is, I don't know, what is it, 10 million or something there. Those are the 3 I had in my head. Maybe there's,
You already have.
oh
one
yeah, the
payment,
Outdoor Recreation Trust Fund.
And you have this one that's already stood up with the department. That's a statutory trust.
That
Right,
Game and
and then
Fish
the-
Trust account
And then
too?
this
is it?
one that we're dealing with, and add this one that we, to that, of course. So that'd be those 4 or 5 that I said. Okay.
Brian, let's start there. That's a good enough start that if we think of something else, we can add it as an amendment, but is everybody still on board? Representative Campbell, are you good? Does everybody understand this latest motion? Are we good to go on it? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed, no. Okay, we'll have that bill draft to look at second meeting. Representative Campbell.
So, a thought, going back to our Game and Fish Department's presentation, in terms of legislative levers and potentially looking at, especially the license recoup, and how we might shift what legislatively that looks like for reduction in fees mandated by the state, and then Game and Fish's ability to recoup that difference from the state.
So comments in that direction. Representative Campbell, are you thinking not just in the ability, the Game and Fish doesn't have the ability to increase license fees. You're not going there. Can you delve a little deeper into that for me?
Absolutely can. I think it's part of, and I'll defer to our director on this. The ability for Game and Fish to recoup costs when there are mandates from the legislative branch that, we lower average cost of a license may be $37, but we want to sell them for $2, giving Game and Fish the ability to recoup that 35 from the state. Because I think that's something you talked about, that 2 to 3 million a year that you lose based on some of those adjustments we make at the state level.
Thank you, Representative. That helps. That caught me up. But Director, is that something that you had in your mind that could be a potential bill?
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Representative. Yeah, that was on my list. I'm waiting for the opportunity, but I think what the representative's talking about is currently the state statute, if I have it right in my head, says we shall submit an ask. And so we submit an ask, and that's it. There's no sort of commitment to fund it. There's just says we have to ask for it.
Make a statutory.
Go ahead, Representative.
Mr. Chairman, if I could then, maybe it is just adjusting that language so that it's when the state does this, then we will pay for that adjustment. I'm not sure
Okay.
what that would look like, but maybe
Is that a motion?
an adjustment.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
Do I have a second to look at a bill in that regard? Representative Conley seconded that. Discussion on this front. This would be a bill that simply looks at that language and modifies to indicate that when we do things with licenses, the state will pay for it, not the sportsman. That make sense? Discussion. Senator Hicks.
Legislature's not obligated to follow it.
I think this bill would obligate us to follow it. I think that's the idea, Senator. See, this year it was requested, but somehow it didn't get in the appropriations bill. So the department, that's $3 or $4 million. So that's what this bill would do, and we could take a look at it. Further discussion?
So, Mr. Chairman,
Senator
I
Hicks.
think concept is worth exploring. I don't think it's probably going to happen, but I'm more than happy to entertain a draft to look at.
I
I
think,
just don't think with the description, we're going to tell future legislatures anytime that we direct, and let's just say one of the 82 agencies to do something, that they automatically do what? Go raise fees for it, or we automatically have to appropriate money and then we
well,
can
it's actually,
repeal that in the budget.
Senator Hicks, it's always been about us doing something, like giving a bunch of licenses away, and that's us giving them away. It's not the Game and Fish giving it away. We ought to pay for what we give away.
Well, we
that-
do now.
That's, yeah.
Anyway.
Okay,
Need a lot more detail.
that's a bill draft that I think is worth looking at.
Question.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no? Okay, that little bill draft passed, and so we will take a quick look at that on the second meeting. Director, I want to come back to you. We covered a little bit of ground there. Would appreciate your involvement in the discussions as we move toward a bill draft that would establish that trust. I want it to be impactful. So I think we've got a couple of figures in that bill that would get us a good start. I agree with Ms. Johnson, who spoke this morning and said, we've got to get up in the neighborhood of several $100 million in this legacy fund if we want it to do what we're kind of dreaming of doing. So sometimes you have to be patient in this line of work, but anyway, beyond that, Director, what are we missing? What do we want to take up that second meeting that we've missed?
I thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the conversation today more than met my expectations. It exceeded them. This is exciting. I do think this idea of the trust, which because of the funding sources you laid out that will go into it, has everyone at the table. Everyone benefits from wildlife and everyone's contributing, which would be a new model and a new direction for the state. But I think it's time. And you saw the models in other states where a lot of other states have gone there over the last 30 years, et cetera. But this feels very Wyoming. In putting a tax on different things such as, doing something with the lottery or taxing something is where a lot of states have gone. And somehow when I talk about that or people give me those ideas, it doesn't feel quite right. But this does. The only other conversation that I've heard a lot from constituents, from our NGO partners and so forth, is another one that Representative Campbell brought up earlier, which is this, all of us walk out on federal land and a lot of times we pay to use federal land. But there is no requirement on our properties or state properties. Should there be one? I don't know. I'm on the fence on that one. I really like not paying. However, it is a model. It's on the federal land. That is another item I hear a lot from folks. So that was the only one that wasn't covered so far to maybe consider.
Director, I liked Senator Hicks brought up early this morning. I think it's the Arizona model that, and I think you're going to get back to us on some ideas on the federal front, right? How we can maximize potentially what we're receiving in the PR funds and whatever. Okay, good. But yeah, thanks for those thoughts. Committee, anything else for the director? That's a busy day and we appreciate you, Director. I know it's a busy time, but thank you. If we can get some of these things drafted up and ready for the second meeting, I think we can hopefully have some impact and go forward with some things to champion. Representative Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know we directed the director to look at all those models. And my question is, could we just trust the director to pick the most reasonable other models that you have and let them suggest to us what they think would be the best model rather than taking up all their time going through every single one of those to come back to us?
I think that is a reasonable suggestion. Does the committee agree? Seems like they do, yeah. So Senator Hicks.
Things.
Get close to your mic.
I think we all realize that, you know, what we're talking about now is with the draft is diversions of existing revenue streams. It's a whole other bailiwick when you start talking about increases of taxes and fees to fund stuff. And so, I mean, and I'm not going to ask the department for this, but I think that puts them in a very difficult position when you're asking them to come in and say, hey, use the Missouri model where you increase sales tax, or use this model and increase.
Sure.
I think we need to be cognizant that the last thing that we want is the state agency coming in here and recommending that we increase fees or taxes someplace to help fund them. So I think that puts the agency in a pretty bad position in public opinion. That's really our decision to make. Now, behind the scenes, we can look at them and have a conversation like we did today with the memo from LSO, but I certainly wouldn't want to be in the director's position to come in here and recommend a tax increase on anybody.
No, I don't think they'll do that. And I don't think they're coming with that. I think that gives the
That's not what
department
you're
an
talking-
opportunity to bring us something that they think might be worth considering.
Okay.
But
I
you know,
misunderstood.
the bottom line, committee, what this committee, I think, can stand for going forward is all of this that we talked about today is worth investing in. And it's worth it enough that we think diverting some funds that go elsewhere, that we need to address this, and we need to stand this up for the years to come. And it's worth every effort we can give to it. And we've got to sell that to our colleagues. I get that. That's the hard part. But I tell you what, in my heart, I believe everything we've talked about today, this is the right thing. And this is worth really championing. You set this fund up and it'll do wonderful things for a whole bunch of Wyoming. That's for sure. So it was a great day to talk about. We can pick it up again tomorrow. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. And maybe I missed this earlier, but pivoting to the discussion with Mr. Magagna and the director, are we clear on how that, I guess we're calling it a working group? Are we clear on how that is going to look? Do you need any more directive on that? I know we talked about you guys are good, all right? Yeah, I know we have, certainly had discussions about it at lunch, but I just want to make sure that this committee is aware of it and we have the right people involved in that, because I thought the last stab we made at it was our last one. I think this is going to be our last chance to get this right. And I continue to have concerns about both sides of the argument digging in their heels. And I hope that and trust that both of you can bring parties to the table that understand that there has to be compromise, because me being included on one side of it, I wasn't willing to give any historically, and I look forward to the product, but I think we really have to be cognizant of the players in the room for success when we have this discussion in September.
Director, thoughts? You're welcome to chime in.
Mr. Chairman, Co-Chairman, I think we are good with the direction you gave us. You know, we also will invite you to the table. You can see how the first meetings go, and we can stay in contact, but I agree with you. I would say nothing's off the table and everything's on the table. And
Yeah.
we have to go into it with that mindset and be very creative. You know, over the last couple years, I've heard a lot, a lot from every side, every way, every shape or form. But I think, you know, starting with that shared learning to understand some different things that have worked in other states and why. And not that it will fit Wyoming, but first starting to understand that.
Yeah.
And that'll be extremely important to build trust in this group and the foundation for the open and honest conversations if we're going to get anywhere. Looking forward to it. Are we optimistic? I think we're optimistic. So we hope to be able to bring you something back.
Yeah, appreciate it, Director. And thank you for letting the committee know. If you would just let our staff know, I know that they will help to make sure the committee knows what the Zoom address is, and we can certainly listen in to what that conversation is, you guys. Great issue that you're tackling. Thank you for doing that. I look forward to the work that you're able to bring back to us, and we'll have a good visit on that front, you know, when we get to the second meeting. Hopefully we can fold this all underneath something really exciting that we can take to the legislature. That would be good. Anything else, Mr. Chairman? I think we're good, folks. I hope everybody can run out. We look forward to visiting with our state parks folks.
Call 4 o'clock just to give everyone.
4 o'clock.
4 o'clock's called 4.
So 4 o'clock at Edna's Kimball Wilkins Park, and you just take off toward Glen Rock. Okay?
If you get to Glen Rock.
Yeah, what's the name of that road, David? What highway is that? Highway 20. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah, there you go. That's right. At 6 exit. We're adjourned, everybody.
Thank you.
We'll see you tomorrow. I think we can leave our stuff, can't we?
Going to that.